Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are, and welcome to the launch of the Cross-Border Paperless Trade Toolkit. My name is Emmanuel Gann. I'm a senior analyst at the World Trade Organization and one of the co-authors of this toolkit. Now, the toolkit was prepared by the WTO in collaboration with UNESCAP and UNCITRAL, and I really would like to extend my sincere thanks to Luca Castellani of UNCITRAL, who is with us virtually today, and Jan Duval, who is with me here, and Soo-Yoon Kim of UNESCAP for their excellent collaboration in this project. Now, why this toolkit? Trade digitalization has many benefits. Using electronic documents and transactions can speed up and facilitate trade, but implementing cross-border paperless trade systems is a rather complex endeavor. And so far, limited guidance is available on the legal and technical actions needed to put in place such systems, which is why we decided to develop that toolkit to raise awareness of the technical and legal tools that can be called upon to adopt cross-border paperless trade systems. So after opening remarks from our DDG Annabel Gonzalez, I will give an overview of the toolkit, and Jan from UNESCAP will then present the cross-border paperless trade readiness assessment guides and checklists on which the toolkit that we're launching today builds. And we will finish with a panel discussion that will be moderated by Luca Castellani of UNCITRAL to hear real-life experiences on the importance and challenges to move towards cross-border paperless trade. Before giving the floor to DDG Annabel Gonzalez, I just would like to note that the event is recorded and the podcast will be made available on the dedicated publication page of the WTO. Interpretation is available in English, French, and Spanish, and you can select the language of your choice by clicking on the small globe icon at the bottom of your screen. Now, without further ado, let me now turn to DDG Annabel Gonzalez for her opening remarks. DDG, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. And hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to join you for the launch of the Cross-Border Paperless Trade Toolkit developed by the WTO in collaboration with UNESCAP and UNCITRAL. And thank you very much to the authors for putting this publication together. This event is very timely. 2 weeks ago, we held our 12th ministerial conference, and amid deepening geopolitical tensions, ministers reached several important agreements that address pressing issues of our times, from the lingering pandemic and the looming food crisis to the health of our oceans and digital transition. Importantly, ministers also decided to set in motion an agenda of reform of the WTO. And in doing so, they highlighted the need to have a full and well-functioning dispute settlement system by 2024. In their statements at the ministerial conference, several ministers from both advanced and developing countries referred to trade digitalization and its potential to help more people in more countries to participate in global trade and to reap its benefits. And we heard similar messages at another event that we had yesterday, marking the 5th anniversary of the entry into force of the Trade Facilitation Agreement. During that event, it was noted that the Trade Facilitation Agreement offers opportunities to digitalize trade and reduce the paperwork involved in trade processes. That would result in cost savings for all firms, including small businesses and those owned by women. For example, the Trade Facilitation Agreement includes provisions on the advanced lodging of documents in electronic format for pre-arrival processing, and it encourages customs authorities to accept paper or electronic copies of supporting documents required for import, export, or transit formalities. The Cross-Border Paperless Trade Toolkit that we are launching today responds to growing demands for practical and solutions-oriented instruments that can harness trade digitalization for easier, less costly, and more inclusive global trade. Paperless trade specifically, and trade facilitation more generally, are also highly relevant in the broader context of the supply chain disruptions that we have been witnessing over the past 2 years. Earlier this year, our Director General, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, hosted a meeting of CEOs of shipping companies, port operators, logistic providers, and traders from around the world to discuss supply chain bottlenecks and explore how we could work together to find solutions. One of the key takeaways of that meeting was the need to accelerate trade digitalization and move to paperless trading systems to make supply chains more efficient and better able to withstand present and future shocks. Over the next hour, we will hear from experts about the benefits of paperless trade, the challenges to implement cross-border paperless trade systems, and how we can work together to bring about more and faster progress in this area. As the toolkit makes clear, even partial implementation of cross-border paperless trade measures could see an export increase of $36 billion annually for the Asia-Pacific region alone. The time required to export could fall on average by 24%, and almost double that figure if cross-border paperless trade were fully implemented. That would be a big win for businesses the world over, especially small businesses who are hit hardest by unnecessary red tape and delays at the border. I would like to thank UNESCAP and UNCITRAL for the excellent collaboration through the preparation of the toolkit. I hope that the toolkit, which builds on paperless trade guides and checklists developed by these two organizations for the Asia-Pacific region, will help accelerate the move to paperless trade on a global scale, in particular in developing countries and least developed countries. To conclude, paperless trade can be a very powerful tool to reduce trade costs, which is key to making economies more efficient, global trade more inclusive, and supply chains more resilient. So I encourage all of you to make the best use of this toolkit and its valuable guidance. I wish you a very successful event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, DG Gonzalez, for your support with this project and for your opening remarks. So let me now give you a taste of what is included in the toolkit we're launching. Of course, you're invited to read the entire toolkit. So let me launch the video. I hope you can see my screen. Yes. So, is it working? Sorry, not moving. That's interesting. Okay, so now it seems to be working. Okay. So let's dive into this cross-border paperless trade toolkit. And first, what is cross-border paperless trade? Now, cross-border paperless trade refers to the digitalization of information flows required to support goods and services crossing borders. So it's basically getting rid of paper for trade transactions and moving to digital systems, which, as we heard right now from DG Gonzalez, can speed up and increase trade, but it can also yield significant environmental benefits by cutting out printing, dispatching, processing, and exchanging paper documents. As we heard in terms of the environmental benefits, if paperless trade is adopted at a global level, the environmental impact it could play is estimated actually to the equivalent of planting over 1 billion trees. The COVID-19 pandemic has made enabling cross-border paperless trade even more urgent, as physical distancing measures made the exchange of paper documents more challenging. Now, cross-border paperless trade systems can be either business to business, so B2B, business to government, or government to government. And there are many different types of paperless trade systems. They can be about electronic customs declarations, electronic port management systems, or electronic single windows. Now, why did we decide to develop this toolkit? Studies have found that cross-border paperless trade measures could truly boost exports, reduce the time needed to export, cut costs, reduce red tape, and we heard some numbers from DDG Annabel Gonzalez right now. But while cross-border paperless trade has many benefits, implementing cross-border paperless trade systems is rather complex. And so far, as I said in my introductory remarks, limited guidance is available on the legal and technical actions needed to put in place such systems. And so this toolkit tries to fill this gap. The main objective of the toolkit is to raise awareness to the technical and legal tools necessary to the adoption of cross-border paperless trade systems, and help drive adoption at a global level, and help in particular developing countries and LDCs. So what is this toolkit? Now, this toolkit, as I said, seeks to bring into focus key actions necessary to the development of paperless trade systems, and it builds on the legal and technical readiness assessment checklists and guides that were developed by UNESCAP in cooperation with UNCITRAL and the EIF as part of the support for the implementation of the framework agreement on facilitation of cross-border paperless trade in Asia and the Pacific. So the toolkit links to the most relevant questions from the guides and checklists for each chapter and section. Now, what is important to keep in mind is that the toolkit does not intend to assess the status of a paperless trade system, but rather to guide interested stakeholders in implementing such systems. The toolkit has 3 main sections: legal, technical, and a section on governance and capacity building. And I will go now a bit deeper into each of these sections. So first, the part on the legal tools or legal actions that are necessary. There are different aspects here that need to be considered. And the first one is the legal recognition of electronic transactions and documents as being functionally equivalent to paper versions, which is really essential to replace paper-based trade systems. So the toolkit explains the importance of such recognition and presents various international instruments that provide national lawmakers with guidance about cross-border alignment on this matter. And so I would like to highlight one instrument in particular, which is the model law adopted in 2017, which is the UNCITRAL model on electronic transferable records, which provides a common definition of electronic transferable records that can be deemed as valid as enforceable as their paper-based equivalents. The toolkit also discusses trust services, which are electronic services that provide assurance of the quality of data. And this assurance is often a requirement to provide electronic documents and transactions with legal effects. So it's really critical when putting in place cross-border paperless trade systems. And for such system to be interoperable, they need to rely on mechanisms guaranteeing an international alignment on what constitutes effectively a valid trust service across borders. So here again, the toolkit includes international guidance, like for example, the reference to the UNCITRAL model law on electronic signatures. The third area that is of particular importance when it comes to the legal dimension is data governance, because when documents and information are exchanged between users of electronic systems or between electronic systems, the system must ensure confidentiality and integrity. So here again, the toolkit provides examples of instruments that provide national lawmakers with guidance to help foster international alignment on data governance. And the last area in this section is liability and dispute management, because guaranteeing access to civil remedies for losses incurred from the incorrect transmission or improper reuse of information and to dispute settlement opportunities is important to enhance trust in paperless trade systems and therefore to support their adoption. So here again, we list relevant treaties and model laws in the toolkit. The second section is about technical tools and actions. And here issues to consider include digital identity. So establishing the identity of users electronically is important to establish confidence in interaction and transactions. And this is important for legal and natural persons, but also for objects. The toolkit discusses electronic payments, the ability of to make payments electronically, which can facilitate and accelerate trade, and is also an important feature of such systems. The third area is data models and semantics, because for parties to exchange and reuse fully electronic messages, all information needs to be clearly defined and unambiguous, both from a semantic and a syntax perspective. So streamlining documentary and data requirements relating to import, export, transit can facilitate data standardization and is critical for cross-border paperless trade systems. Now, communication protocols, which are rules that govern the way a particular system functions and communication, but also connectivity and data security are also essential areas. And so for each of these issues, the toolkit provides international guidance and examples of good practices and links to the relevant sections of the UNESCAP readiness assessment guides and checklists. Now, for issues related to digital identity, data models, and communication protocols, there's also useful guidance provided in the standards toolkit, and that was published a few months ago by the WTO and the International Chamber of Commerce, which is a toolkit that maps existing standards, including foundational identity standards, standards for commercial transaction documents, standards for transport, etc. And the last section of the toolkit is about governance and capacity building, because coordination among government agencies is essential since digital trade typically cuts across many government agencies. So coordination can be carried out more efficiently and effectively if one government department takes the lead together with a cross-cutting industry body. And here, national trade facilitation committees, for example, can play an important role as multi-stakeholder coordination bodies. Another critical factor for successful implementation of paperless trade systems is training and equipping the various stakeholders involved with the capability to connect to and utilize paperless trade systems effectively. So as such, we've also identified in the toolkit the international and regional organizations that have and can provide technical assistance and support programs necessary to move towards a more paperless and future-proof trading system. So what comes next? The toolkit will be translated into French and Spanish, and we are also working on a training module that will be made available online so that people interested can go a bit further. And I'm now done with this presentation, and I will pass the floor to Jan to present on the guides and checklists. Jan, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, Emmanuel. Let me start by saying thank you to WTO and also to UNCITRAL for this collaboration. I think it's very good to see bringing some of the regional tools that are developed in different regions of the world and bring them to the global level. I think this is something that needs to be done more and more. My video is off apparently now, so let me try again. Okay. All right. Okay, very good. So what I'm going to do, I don't want to repeat some of the things you've been doing, but I want to give a little bit of background on some of the things we've been doing in the region that actually provided the basis for the WTO toolkit. So let me try and share my presentation here. Coming soon. Let's see whether that will work or not. Okay, that works well. All right. So as mentioned by Emmanuel, the toolkit is built very much on the checklist and also the guide that was developed at ESCAP in collaboration with UNCITRAL and many of the governments of the Asia Pacific region. Why did ESCAP focus on cross-border paperless trade? So I think this was already mentioned a little bit in the opening and also by Emmanuel. I mean, what we see cross-border paperless trade as kind of the next generation trade facilitation, right? Many countries are developing, digitizing trade procedures and making it easy to exchange electronic data and information among their agencies between stakeholders within the countries. And so really the next step is to move and exchange all this electronic data and documents across countries, so across borders. So this became something very important for the countries of our region, because some of our countries are very advanced already in paperless trade and have been advanced in paperless trade for a long time. Singapore is one example. Republic of Korea is another example. So there was quite a bit of demand for this. The ASEAN region as well, in fact. And so the readiness assessments really aim to identify where a country stands in terms of both the legal gaps that may be there for cross-border paperless trade and the technical gaps that may be there for cross-border paperless trade. And then it enables then, based on the readiness assessment result, to generate recommendation and to generate individual action plan for countries to move forwards very much gradually towards cross-border paperless trade, because I think we all have to recognize that this is something that is very difficult to do. So the background for all this work is actually the United Nations Treaty on Cross-Border Paperless Trade Facilitation that was negotiated among member states in ESCAP between 2012 and 2016. So that treaty entered into force, in fact, in 2021, so just last year, after 5 countries ratified it. And the idea of the framework agreement on facilitation of cross-border paperless trade in Asia and the Pacific is really to enable and to find ways to exchange electronically across borders, as well as to enable the legal recognition of those electronic exchange among all ESCAP member states. So ESCAP member states, initially, we've got 53 member states. And a big focus of the framework agreement is to enable interoperability among the single windows. So there's a very direct link between what is being done under the WTO TFA and other areas and the treaty. And the focus of the framework agreement is really to enable this interoperability between those electronic single windows that are being developed in different countries. And so the idea of the framework agreement is to provide a dedicated intergovernmental platform to develop legal and technical solutions, because those legal and technical solutions in many cases are still yet to be developed, right? There's a lot of pilots going on, but it's again, countries in general have been struggling to find ways to exchange this electronic data and documents related to trade across borders. And so a key thing that the countries need to do once they ratify and join this treaty is to conduct a self-assessment of their gaps and they develop an own action plan, right? So the natural thing that was done as soon as the treaty negotiations were over is for the interim intergovernmental steering group on cross-border paperless trade facilitation to start developing a checklist, readiness checklist, to support the implementation of the treaties. And so that's the basis then for the further work we've done and for the WTO toolkit here. So if you want more information, I provided a link here. So there is a legal checklist and there is a technical checklist developed actually by 2 separate intergovernmental working groups, because it's people have very different perspective on what needs to be done, depending whether they are lawyers or whether they are IT people, right? So it gets very interesting, in fact. For the legal checklist, you can see, I can't go into a lot of details, but here I'm showing there is 4 broad categories, right? And so this is, again, very much consistent with the WTO toolkit. There is a number of questions related to electronic transaction and signatures law that needs to be addressed. So there is a lot of questions that have to be answered in order to assess the gaps related to this. That's part 1 of the legal checklist. The second part of the legal checklist is the laws regarding paperless trade system, for example, single window laws as well, or specific laws related to those paperless trade system that may be available or need to be developed. And then the third component is cross-border aspects. So you can see that we actually cover not only cross-border paperless trade, but also paperless trade from the very beginning, right? Because it's all interlinked. So the third section of the checklist is on cross-border aspects. And beyond that, it also goes into other considerations very much related to paperless trade systems operations and quite advanced legal issues like liability issues related to cross-border paperless trade, dispute settlement, conflict of laws, and even into competition laws. So it's quite comprehensive in that sense. The technical checklist, in a way, is a little bit simpler. There is 2 parts. There is part A, paperless trade system at the national level. So a number of all the things you need to look at if you want to develop a paperless trade system at the national level. We call it technical checklist, but it's also it also covered institutional setup, right? To make sure that you can develop such a system at the national level. And part B is a national status towards cross-border data exchange. So again, a bit of differentiation between what needs to happen at the national level paperless trade system and the cross-border aspects. So it's quite complicated to fill up those checklists by yourself. I mean, you need to have expertise in law and in technical matters, right? So what we've done is we've developed an what we call an interactive guide on the basis of the checklist that everybody can go to, right? You go to readiness.digitalizetrade.org, and then it really gives you some guidance on how to fill up and use the checklist because our experience is that it's not so easy to do. And so what I decided not to go and do a live demonstration because it always ends badly. But here, what I'm showing you a screen view so you can see, right, what's happening if you go online. You really have a list of all the questions in the checklist. And for each question, you've got the background of why the question is there, what are the good practices, and also all the references and guides to, I mean, the reference to international standards and so on, right? So you're very welcome to take a look at this. And we have this both for the legal checklist and the technical checklist. On top of that, so you're not recommended to use this quick technical assessment from the beginning. You're supposed to do the full technical assessment before you do the quick one. But you can, if you do the quick, once you've got all your answers on the technical assessment, you can fill up a small surveys for each question, answering yes, partially yes, no to each question. And as the system gives you recommendation of what you're supposed to do, depending on what your answers are to the different questions. And so this, in principle, you can even take some of those things and copy paste them into your national action plan if you want to do such a thing. So again, you're very welcome to take a look. What we've done at ESCAP is support national cross-border paperless trade readiness assessments in many countries, and a lot of demand for this. So we've already done 14 countries. So all the reports actually are online. So after readiness assessment and also the national action plan drafted, right, based on the report. And we have 5 ongoing readiness assessment right now, including one now that is outside the region, Mexico. And I'm very happy we have a speaker from Mexico in the next session to tell us a little bit what they are doing. Let me end with a little bit on partnerships and way forward. So the readiness assessment guide and tool was developed with UNCITRAL and with the WTO Enhanced Integrated Framework support, because at ESCAP, we really focus on developing countries and support to least developed countries also in particular. So the toolkit with WTO, so we very much welcome this new development. We also collaborate a lot with now sub-regional entities. So ASEAN is one region that have been very dynamic in terms of cross-border paperless trade. They have the ASEAN single window systems that have been under development. And so what's happening is that the framework agreement that I mentioned earlier, right, has been identified in the work plan of the ASEAN agreement on e-commerce, right? So we've already conducted about, I think, readiness assessments in about 5 countries in ASEAN. And then the idea is to do this in all the other countries and see what comes out of it. The other things we are doing is we are expanding collaboration with other regions. So we are working with our sister organization, ECLAC, Economic Commission for Latin America. And so we are developing a Spanish version of the digital guide, right? The tool. And then also ECLAC is supporting assessment in Mexico. And so again, from our side, we're very happy, although we're based in Bangkok, right, to support any other partnerships related to this work, which I think is relevant at the global level. So let me stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jan. And so let's now move to the panel discussion that will be moderated by Luca Castellani from UNCITRAL, who is also one of the key actors who developed this toolkit and was also involved in the readiness assessment guides and checklists. So Luca, over to you.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel, and a warm good morning, good afternoon, good evening from Vienna, Austria. Let me first of all very quickly share also from our side the pleasure to be here today and the great satisfaction for partnering with the WTO and ESCAP in this important toolkit. I would say from our perspective, we know often legal issues are seen as a bit esoteric for the rest of us. I believe that this publication very well puts together the three main components, as we always say: policy decisions, the technical aspects, of course, and the legal aspects. And I would like to say all three, however, are driven, and this is, of course, also as a homage to you and to Jan, by economic considerations, which are also very important. Now, I believe that the first panelist will speak remotely and will speak actually with a pre-recorded video. So this is Mr. Alan Geronimo, Deputy Commissioner, Management Information Systems and Technology Group, Bureau of Customs of the Philippines. So I would ask the colleagues in Geneva if they could possibly start the video.
Yes, we will start the video. Just to flag, Luca, that we lost your picture. Oh, you're back. Okay, great.
Yeah.
To the members and guests in today's event, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It is my pleasure to present our experience in implementing cross-border paperless trade in the Philippines. Trade plays a pivotal role in enabling countries such as the Philippines to integrate into the world economy. Efficient and transparent trade procedures are essential for making trade more inclusive and for minimizing the negative impacts associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. This is why the Philippines became one of the first 5 countries that have acceded to the Framework Agreement on facilitation of cross-border paperless trade in Asia and the Pacific, as we recognize the need to strengthen and upgrade systems that facilitate trade. Furthermore, this framework serves as a foundation for elaborating more detailed activities at the national and agency levels, supports the continuous development and enhancement of trade-related electronic systems and other trade IT projects, promotes interoperability among trade-related agencies, enhances trade facilitation, and opens opportunities for electronic exchange of cross-border documents. While the Philippines has made significant progress in implementing trade facilitation measures, with our implementation level now significantly above the Asia-Pacific regional average, we recognize that the implementation of cross-border paperless trade measures in the Philippines remains uneven among agencies and stakeholders due to technical challenges and issues on data harmonization, as well as the lack of in-depth understanding and appreciation on automation initiatives. Legal barriers, such as the lack of regional agreement, also limit the exchange of electronic documents. We are grateful to the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, better known as the UNESCAP, for providing us technical assistance on the conduct of the readiness assessment of legal and technical gaps. The readiness assessment, together with the action plan, can help the Philippines identify the degree to which the technical environment is ready to support cross-border paperless trade, identify existing gaps, and design actions for improvement. It raised awareness on technical issues in cross-border paperless trade, such as institutional and governance bodies for electronic data exchange. On the policy side, it helped us identify potential legal gaps and highlighted what we need to do to ensure the laws support engagement in cross-border paperless trade as envisaged in the Framework Agreement. To move forward on a cross-border paperless exchange, the readiness assessment provided valuable recommendations that shall help support the Philippines in pursuing trade-related electronic systems and other trade IT projects of the government, in updating of the national single window system to handle all types of documents in cross-border trade, and the utilization of its routing platform for information and data exchange, and in supporting the enactment of a law related to the management of the national single window system. As a way forward, the Philippines shall refer to the recommendations of the Readiness Assessment Study in accelerating trade digitalization. Moreover, we shall support increasing awareness at the national level of the Framework Agreement and conduct similar stakeholder engagements in partnership with ESCAP. The Philippines encourages everyone to also conduct the readiness assessments using the ESCAP Legal and Technical Readiness Checklist, the Readiness Assessment Guide, and the Cross-Border Paperless Trade Toolkit. In closing, the Philippines wishes to convey our support in advanced trade through the implementation of a cross-border paperless trade initiatives. Thank you very much, and mabuhay.
And thank you very much to Mr. Geronimo for sharing his experience. And we go from the Philippines to Mongolia, two countries in Asia, of course, that have different needs, but they are united in the search for a solution to those needs. And I have to say, from the UNCITRAL perspective, both countries, Mongolia has recently acceded to the UN Convention on the Use of Electronic Communications in International Contracts, and the Philippines will do so next week. So we praise both countries for adopting the most recent and most effective UNCITRAL legal standards in this field. Our next speaker is Segi Oyun-suk, who is at the permanent mission of Mongolia at the World Trade Organization. Segi, you have the floor.
Hello, thank you very much, Luca. It's my pleasure to speak at this panel today. Also, the congratulations to our colleagues for launching such a useful toolkit for us today. First of all, just let me answer the question, why is the cross-border paperless trade is important for us from our perspective? As one of the landlocked countries in the world, Mongolia is facing higher transport costs, which is on average in more than 50% compared to the access to the sea. I think this is definitely one of the main reasons for reducing and competitiveness of our domestic producers and increasing the price of the imported goods. Obviously, this challenge is exacerbated by global pandemic, and over the course of the plus of 2 years of the global pandemic, we are experiencing a significant supply chain disruption that comes from notably logistical constraints. Since the last year, thousands of Mongolian containers have been stalled at some ports because of the COVID restrictive measures, which is imposed by the transit countries. Of course, it resulted in uncertainties and setbacks such as logistical delays and additional transportation costs and the sharp increase in the food prices. All these factors that I mentioned have generated any spillover effects on our economy, especially the businesses and consumers. Now we are grappling with the inflationary environment, and like many other countries in the world, and our annual headline inflation reached 50% as May of this year. So throughout the pandemic, what is clear to us is that there is pressing needs to accelerate in cross-border paperless trade in terms of the curbing these obstacles. For the sake of the time and cost efficiency, we need to enhance in our connectivity by digitalizing in our border process and adopt an interoperable and interconnected system. It is also equally important for us to harmonize in cross-border procedures with the neighboring countries. And therefore, what we are really encouraged by these cross-border paperless trade measures is that we effectively implement them along with the trade facilitation measures reflected in WTO trade facilitation agreement. And then we could offset trade costs by 30%. In that sense, our government is very much focused on and supportive of all efforts to spur the cross-border paperless trade. trade. So let me reiterate that cross-border paperless trade approaches worth pursuing in terms of how to effectively reduce the trade hurdles. But we have to keep in mind it is cross-cutting issue that would require both coordination and cooperation between the various stakeholders at the national and regional level. So to ensure more meaningful and durable collaboration between them, we need to identify all impediments that get in the way of creating the paperless environment. In this regard, the government of Mongolia has very much appreciated the UNCITRAL for conducting the comprehensive assessment on our legal and technical situation in 2019. The thing I'd like to point out is that this assessment elaborated in all key aspects that should be taken into consideration by us in terms of intensifying in process, and also provided a clear guidance and an initial plan on what needs to be done and to leverage from the paperless trade. Under the recommendation embedded this assessment, we are making a number of developments in that field, especially from legal point of view. And over the course of 2 years, Mongolia joined the UN Convention on the use of electronic communication in international contracts, and also most importantly, in a framework agreement on facilitation of the cross-border paperless trade in the Asia Pacific. Apart from that, then also the variety of regulatory measures have been put in place with the view to digitalizing trade. And recently, our government is pursuing a policy agenda named in Building a Digital Nation within the 5 years. With that purpose, the new Ministry for Digitalization was established recently. Now we will orient ourselves in how we can harness the technology in terms of moving towards the paperless trade. These diligent efforts is undertaken by our government is demonstrating how we deeply cares about the cross-border paperless trade, and how the assessment carried out the UNCITRAL is useful for the paving the way to better visualize in our further actions. In terms of the key findings from this assessment is, from our perspective, we recognized in all the stumbling blocks to fully integrated in paperless transformation by virtue of this assessment. And because of the time constraint, let me just highlight a couple of things from the key findings. Under the recommendation, and our starting point is to harmonize in trade and transit data by using common international standards with our neighboring countries. Another main thrust of the recommendation is to accelerate national single window and other paperless trade systems that we are interoperable across the borders. Indeed, we need this operable mechanism, because if the businesses go through the different channels to meet in different regulatory requirements, it would be another burdensome. When it comes to the legal framework, and we were recommended the necessary legal environment for the ability of the parties involved in cross-border paperless trade. And in this connection, this toolkit is also worthwhile and very useful at this point, and because it indicated in all standards which are tailor-made to our needs. And in fact, we already benefited some of these standards which are listed in this toolkit. For instance, the customs authority are using a WCO data model that definitely helps to spur the paperless trade. With regards to the way forward, we will keep our eyes on the ball in terms of how to accelerate in cross-border paperless trade using these all available tools that we have. And particularly, we believe the framework agreement along with this toolkit would go a long way to deliver in concrete results in our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Segi, for this short but very comprehensive overview. Let me just stress from what you said, first of all, the incredible importance of paperless trade facilitation to counterbalance supply chain disruptions that are coming from the pandemic and from other major events, as you correctly said, more so and magnified, as you correctly pointed out, by of course, the landlocked nature of your country. And where I would like to say, of course, we want to overcome geographic and other challenges. Not only Soviet Mongolia can, of course, receive the goods it needs, but also Mongolia is a major exporter of commodities. So difficulties in exporting those commodities will have a rippling effect across the global economy. So it is always a common good. And I would also like to say this toolkit is, of course, a cooperative effort, but we know that there are other organizations that we are all working with. Last week or a couple of weeks ago, there were consultations in Ulaanbaatar with UNCTAD for their rapid trade assessment. So we will soon have even more tools there for assessing the current status of e-commerce in Mongolia. Thank you very much. And now we change continent and we change language. As our next speaker is a Spanish speaker. Entonces nuestra próxima panelista es hispanohablante y es de México. La maestra Cindy Rayo Zapata, directora general de Comercio Internacional de Servicios e Inversión de la Secretaría de Economía de México. Maestra, tiene la palabra.
Muchas gracias, Luca, y primero que nada, muchas gracias por la invitación. Es para mí un gusto estar con ustedes en este evento de lanzamiento del conjunto de instrumentos para el Toolkit sobre comercio sin papel, y quisiera primero que nada felicitar a la OMC, a UNCITRAL, a ESCAP, quienes han hecho posible el desarrollo de este Toolkit, que sin duda pues es una gran herramienta para los países y un gran referente para implementar o transitar hacia un sistema de comercio transfronterizo sin papel. Me complace también compartirles que México forma parte de este conjunto de estudios para evaluar el estado de avance de México en el comercio sin papel. Es un estudio que está siendo liderado por la CEPAL a través de la Unidad de Comercio Internacional y un grupo de consultores. Y bueno, como ya lo han venido señalando anteriormente a lo largo de esta sesión, el comercio sin papel, bueno, contribuye a incrementar la competitividad, a disminuir los costos, a eficientar los procesos, sobre todo a lo largo de las cadenas globales de valor. Y en el caso de México, yo les voy a platicar la experiencia de México y el avance que ha tenido México en los últimos años en la implementación del comercio sin papel. En los tratados de libre comercio que México ha celebrado, como por ejemplo el Tratado de la Alianza del Pacífico, del que forman parte Chile, Perú, Colombia, el tratado con Estados Unidos y con Canadá, también el Tratado Integral Progresista de Asociación Transpacífico, se han incluido disciplinas relacionadas con el comercio sin papel. Tanto en capítulos referentes a la administración aduanera y facilitación al comercio, como también a través de disciplinas en los capítulos de comercio electrónico y, por supuesto, sin dejar de lado los compromisos que México tiene como miembro del Acuerdo sobre Facilitación de Comercio de la OMC. México se encuentra, según el estudio, la encuesta global sobre facilitación del comercio digital y sostenible, México ocupa una posición que lo coloca como líder en la región de América Latina y del Caribe, obteniendo el mejor puntaje de la región en cuanto a los avances en el uso del comercio sin papel. Ahora, ¿cuál es el nivel de preparación legal de México respecto al comercio transfronterizo sin papel? México tiene, tanto a nivel de marco jurídico nacional como a la luz de los tratados comerciales internacionales, diversas leyes que abarcan los temas relacionados con comercio sin papel. así como un sistema avanzado también en temas de protección y de privacidad, de protección de datos. Y esto, el sistema jurídico nacional se ha robustecido con la adopción de disciplinas o la incorporación de disciplinas relacionadas con comercio sin papel a través de los tratados comerciales internacionales. En México se cuenta ya con un sistema que facilita tanto a los importadores como a los exportadores el despacho aduanero de mercancías, y esto se logra mediante el uso y aceptación por parte de las autoridades aduaneras de, por ejemplo, declaraciones electrónicas. Hoy prácticamente todo el despacho aduanero en México se realiza en formatos electrónicos y solamente en algunos casos se requiere del documento, de la presentación del documento en físico. También existe un gran avance en el desarrollo de la ventanilla única en México. Este se ha consolidado como un gran instrumento para facilitar las declaraciones de importación y de exportación en formato electrónico, para tramitar permisos de importación, certificados de origen y declaraciones de valor electrónicamente a través de esta ventanilla única, de tal forma que pues México también tiene un sistema bastante avanzado a través de estas ventanillas únicas. Hay algunos aspectos como, por ejemplo, que hacen falta mejorar en el sentido de, por ejemplo, los permisos de exportación y certificados fitosanitarios. Se está trabajando para que estos también puedan realizarse de manera electrónica a través de la ventanilla única. A nivel regional, y aquí me gustaría resaltar el trabajo que se ha hecho, por ejemplo, en la Alianza del Pacífico, en el que ya se establece la emisión de certificados electrónicos y se ha trabajado entre los 4 países en el diseño de una hoja de ruta para materializar todas estas acciones tendientes a desarrollar o a lograr la interoperabilidad entre las diferentes ventanillas únicas de comercio exterior y ofrecer que una mayor cantidad de trámites puedan ser realizados en línea en temas de comercio exterior. Por ejemplo, lo que se ha hecho en la Alianza del Pacífico es buscar el reconocimiento de los documentos firmados electrónicamente en el marco de interoperabilidad de las ventanillas únicas. También el procedimiento general para la emisión y recepción de los certificados de origen emitidos y firmados electrónicamente a través de las ventanillas únicas. Y esto, por supuesto, favorece la expedición de certificados de origen expedidos también de manera electrónica. Y me congratula decir que estas ventanillas únicas en el marco o la región de la Alianza del Pacífico operan de manera muy eficiente y tienen un avance también importante en el uso del comercio sin papel. Ahora, creo que es importante también resaltar el nivel de desarrollo o implementación técnica que existe a nivel de país, a nivel interno en el caso de México, sobre cómo se impulsan estos sistemas. Y lo primero se muestra es que México actualmente cuenta también con sistemas robustos para recibir información anticipada, para hacer análisis automatizado de riesgos y, como les decía, también un sistema de ventanilla única reconocido a nivel internacional. Sin embargo, bueno, también reconocemos que hay áreas de oportunidad en el caso de México. Por ejemplo, no existe un cuerpo normativo dirigido que conjugue o que conjunte todas las diversas disciplinas o diversas disposiciones que hay en los diferentes ordenamientos legales y es importante o consideramos que sería importante contar con un cuerpo normativo dirigido especialmente al comercio sin papel. Esto es una tarea compleja dada la gran cantidad de documentos que involucran las transacciones electrónicas, pero creemos que este es un área de oportunidad. Y una segunda área de oportunidad también es lograr una mayor interoperabilidad entre las autoridades y sobre todo entre los socios comerciales y otros países para extender el uso de certificados de origen electrónico bajo los tratados de libre comercio que México tiene. Y bueno, sin duda, las herramientas que nos muestran a través de este toolkit y que se lanza el día de hoy serán son de gran valor para hacer frente a estos retos y tratar de abordar estas oportunidades que todos los países tenemos para avanzar hacia un comercio transfronterizo sin papel. Y nuevamente, muchas felicidades por la presentación de este instrumento que sin duda será de gran utilidad para todos nosotros. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, maestra Rayo, para sus comentarios tan pertinentes y entre otros para subrayar los enlaces muy estrechos entre los tratados de libre comercio y la facilitación del comercio sin papel. Yo ya he leído el proyecto de informe sobre la condición de facilitación del comercio sin papel en México. Es muy detallado, muy interesante y quizás podría ser un modelo para otros países de América Latina y países hispanohablantes. Muchísimas gracias. And now changing again language and continent, I have the pleasure to introduce the final speaker of this panel discussion, who will sum up from a perspective actually of intergovernmental organization, Mr. Simon Hess, who is head of the monitoring and evaluation at the Enhanced Integrated Framework. I would like to recall in that respect that the Enhanced Integrated Framework has been instrumental in the work that we have done in the beginning with ESCAP on drafting the first paperless kits for assessment on technical and legal aspects of trade facilitation.
Thank you very much, Luca, for that introduction and then the very kind words. Indeed, it's been an absolute pleasure for the EIF to collaborate with UNCITRAL and UNESCAP at the initial stages, and today with WTO as well. It's really wonderful to join you all here, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this discussion around paperless trade, and congratulations on the launch of the toolkit. In starting, I would like you all to remember one number, or well, one percentage, 95%. I must emphasize that in this field, and to implement the ambitions of the trade facilitation agreement of the WTO, partnerships are critical. From the perspective of the EIF, we've been really pleased to collaborate with the project that Jan mentioned earlier, with UNESCAP, to support paperless trade assessments in Bangladesh, Cambodia, Nepal, and Timor-Leste. And really pleased that UNESCAP is really scaling up this work into a number of other countries as well. The assessments have really helped to raise awareness in these countries and to sensitize ministries and to bring them towards regional frameworks around cross-border paperless trade. And partnerships with the WTO have also been key to further build on these initiatives and to develop the product launched today. Our partnership in the EIF has continued with UNESCAP, and there's another project currently underway which looks to further deepen the support and in particular assist the LDCs to utilize emerging technologies through conducting feasibility studies and regional networking with regional coordination and collaboration through a sub-regional task force to work towards a pilot-based electronic data exchange. Finally, and again, with respect to partnerships, not only is there significant coordination required at the country level, and I think when Emmanuel was speaking about the governance being a key factor in driving paperless trade, I can't agree more. In this project, UNESCAP is collaborating with a number of other partners, and this partnership is really key, such as the Asian Development Bank, World Customs Organizations, the Korea Customs Service, and IBM as well. Now, to show the value of paperless trade, we really need to deliver and show results. And here I'd like to highlight some very interesting work being undertaken in Vanuatu in the development of their electronic single window. Again, this is another story of partnership between the governments of Vanuatu, Australia, and the EIF, with superb implementation support through UNCTAD and collaboration with the World Bank and others. The results from this project contribute towards more efficient and effective trade. And importantly, as Emmanuel mentioned at the start as well, have very clear and significant environmental, and in the case of COVID, social results and benefits. In Vanuatu, carbon dioxide emissions have been reduced by over 5,000 kilograms by reducing or eliminating the paperwork just from the first module on SPS processes. Physical trips required in the SPS certification process have been reduced by 86%. And who remembers the number that I mentioned at the start? Thank you. Paperwork in the SPS certification application process is down by an astounding 95%. For cargo clearing, things have been even more successful, with both the paperwork and the requirement for physical trips having been completely eliminated. Overall, this has contributed towards Vanuatu being rated through a UNESCAP survey as the top performing Asia Pacific small island developing state in digital and sustainable trade in 2021. Further modules around, for instance, disaster relief are under implementation, and discussions are also underway to provide digital solutions around the legal trade of CITES listed species. There are also many more initiatives underway by the EIF and the LDCs, including supporting regulatory systems for e-commerce in Rwanda through to an ambitious e-governance project in Bhutan, which is an important stepping stone towards cross-border paperless trade through supporting digitalization of business registrations and data, as well as interestingly an online auction process for potatoes and the development of a one-stop trade and investment portal. With a strong network in the LDCs, the EIF is ready to help raise awareness and through existing mechanisms support the implementation of the cross-border trade paperless trade toolkit. We're very grateful to the commitment and the drive in many of the LDCs to implement paperless trading systems, to the partners and agencies of the EIF for their technical support, and critically also to the donors to the EIF Trust Fund. If you'd like to find out more about the work of the EIF, our 2021 annual report has just been released and is available on our website. Thank you very much. Thank you, Luca.
Thank you, Simon. And I would just like to add my thanks to EIF as well as to the donors of EIF, because UNCITRAL, for instance, has benefited from that by being able to go to Kiribati and to assist the government of Kiribati in adopting legislation on e-transactions and e-signature, which is instrumental to set up the national single windows. So thanks, and we look forward to future work. And it's now the time for me to give the floor back to Emmanuel for the conclusion. We are a few minutes, I would say, reasonably beyond the usual schedule. I encourage people to put questions in the Q&A. We are answering as actively as we can. Unfortunately, there will not be a chance to answer them live, but we are of course all available here to follow up after the event. Thanks again, Emmanuel, and floor back to you.
Thank you, Luca, and a big thank you to all our speakers today and to our interpreters. Now we hope that you find the toolkit useful. I should show it. This toolkit. Well, oh no, it doesn't very well. Yes, you can do it for me. Thank you. Simon, the numbers that you gave, Simon, were really impressive on Vanuatu. So I think it really shows the benefits of moving paperless and of cross-border paperless trade. So we really hope that this toolkit will help drive adoption at the global level of cross-border paperless trade systems and help in particular developing countries and LDCs move towards paperless trade systems. So do not hesitate to reach out to us, to reach out to UNESCAP if you're from the Asia Pacific region and need help or advice, to the EIF if you're an LDC, and to UNCITRAL, who is the organization to go to for assistance on UNCITRAL texts. And as I said in my presentation of the toolkit, we will also develop a training course based on this toolkit. So we hope that these various tools will make it easier, in particular for developing countries and LDCs, to put in place cross-border paperless trade systems, and will accelerate the move to paperless trade on a global scale to make trade more efficient, more resilient, and more inclusive. As I noted in my opening remarks, the recording of this webinar will be made available on the WTO event page. It will also be available on the WTO YouTube channel, and we will upload the presentations. We had some questions in the chat on that. Now, with these words, let me conclude this event and close our webinar. Thank you very much to you all for attending. Bye.